posting them on the YouTube channel so that if you miss a day, you can go online and you can see the lecture. All right, so you'll notice the first word here is in purple. Today we're talking about neurotransmitter, neuro for neuron, for brain, for nervous system. What is it to transmit something?
So like these are notes? Right?
These are our notes, yeah. So this goes on what page, folks?
No, right
on the right side. Once again, stars all around.
Is that purple or blue?
That is our purple, thank you. So, what is it to transmit something? Like phones transmit and TVs transmit, your voice transmits.
What?
Terrific, right? It's the sending of some kind of information, right? So what we're really talking about here is, as a neurotransmitter, we're talking about something of the brain that is transmitting information. And those of you who started the homework reading last night, you came across this word as part of it. So a neurotransmitter is a chemical substance. It's found in between all neurons in the brain and the body. And generally they travel from the end of one nerve across a synapse, which is a gap, a space in between nerve cells, to the beginning of the next neuron. Therefore, carrying this information, transferring an impulse. And this word impulse isn't unfamiliar or unusual. Where have you heard the word impulse before? Like if you act on impulse or something is done on impulse. Or you're impulsive, yeah.
It's done without thinking.
It's done without thinking, it's done instantly, right? So we're thinking about, you don't have to consciously will these chemicals to move throughout your body. It's not like I have to think transmit, 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 right? Something happens around you, you hear something, you see something, you smell something, and the reaction is instantaneous and involuntary. So this word impulse is indicating that you don't have a decision in it, it's just occurring on its own. And these impulses affect the body in a variety of ways. For one, it could activate a muscle fiber. What is a reflexive behavior? What is it to have a reflex? We've all had this test at the doctor at one point or another. Yeah, they do that thing with the knee. What do they do with what? What are they doing that knee thing for? Yeah, they hit a little hammer. What are they looking to see? Yeah. And have folks had this done to them before? They hit you with a little hammer on the knee?
Yes.
What happens when they
Your
hit you?
leg.
Yeah, and like, did you say like, oh, I'm going to move my leg now? Or did it just kind of happen on its own? Just happened, right? So if I were to like jump at her, what would I expect her to do? Flinch, right? The impulse occurs without conscious thought, right? She automatically undergoes this behavior because of the movement of these chemicals. This can also activate a gland. It can cause some kind of release of a hormone. It can cause you to do something. Later on in the year, we'll talk about fight or flight, and we'll talk about adrenaline, the hormone of, when you're scared or excited. Based on what you are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, different neurotransmitters will be released into your nervous system. Can anyone remind me? Actually, wait, I'm sorry, I'll do the cup thing. This one on the spot. I'll give you a chance to know what you're going to be asked, though. What was the word we used yesterday to describe our 5 senses as a kind of information? And feel free to look at response from yesterday's notes if you've forgotten. And, oh, Elizabeth is at the guidance office, so she can't be the one to tell us. We'll pick someone new. It'll be Claudia. 2 days in a row. So, Claudia, what was that word we used, beginning with an S, that describes our 5 senses? And you can welcome to look at response under yesterday's notes if you've forgotten. All right, you can help us survive? Sure. What else, though? All right, let's throw a lifeline over here. Gustavo's got it. It is stimulus, or stimuli, right? So stimuli being the plural, stimulus being an individual, right? So, yeah, there it is, right? So impulses are the product, they are the effect of an affect, which is the stimulus, right? So the stimulus is the thing you heard, smell, taste, touched. The impulse is the reaction, it's the release of the chemicals. Now, a common one that appears on the MCAS is acetylcholine. So You'll see this in the book. You'll see it on some of our practice tests later on. You'll see it on
Do we have
next
to write
Friday's test. Notice that this one's just in black. It's not a separate color because it's a kind of neurotransmitter. So acetylcholine.
Do we write this?
Please do, yes. Generally speaking, if I don't want you to write something, I'll have it in italics, and I'll cue you. All right, so acetylcholine specifically stimulates muscles, and it's what causes you to go into REM sleep. Has anyone heard that expression before, REM? You don't know what it means? You're watching any videos about sleep, or any movies where, like, you know, people are, like, put in a trance or something? If you ever see those films where someone's having a nightmare or something, what are their eyelids doing?
Something.
They're
we know
twitching, flicking, right? You guys both use different language, but it's the same thing, right? So what acetylcholine does is it stimulates the movement of muscles, right? It's what keeps you going. It keeps actions occurring in your body. So it's therefore considered a very important neurotransmitter, as it allows you to do almost all the things we do throughout the day. And why do folks think that you're moving around in your sleep? Why are you having this rapid eye movement? Or like, you know, everyone's watched like a sleeping child, or you share a bedroom with a sibling and they're like moving around in the evening. What do you think's going on? Like, why do you think they'd be moving around?
They can't.
All right, and if they're restless, if they're kind of moving about a bit, what do you think is occurring in their brain?
They're moving in
They might be dreaming, right? They might be moving around their dream. Dreams are a way for our brain to run scenarios and like process things that have happened to us or things we think will happen to us. It's kind of like a fantasy realm where you get to test out what might happen. All right.
Hold on.
Let's move on to the next one. Same slide, don't worry, don't be terrified. All right. In orange today, we're going to use our orange colored pencil. We're going to talk about a part of the neuron called the dendrite. So, you know, if you've got one of those ultra cool multi-packs of pencils, you have multiple kinds of orange, just choose an orange of your liking. We're only using one orange today. All right, so the dendrite, thanks. The dendrite is the part of the nerve that's going to receive a neurotransmitter. So there are these short little branches. They look like little tree limbs.
No, nothing.
Oh.
I'm talking to myself.
Yeah, I do it too. You guys can see me in the morning riding my bike and having a full conversation. I've tried for years to stop. I just can't. I've resigned to the fact that I'm one of those crazy old people on the bus, like muttering to himself. All right, so a dendrite is a short branch-like structure. It receives neurotransmitters from the previous neuron. And again, those neurotransmitters travel across what's called a synapse, a junction, a space in between neurons. So I want you to think of the dendrite as being like a catcher's mitt. You know, neuron A will send neurotransmitters into the synapse, and then the dendrite of neuron B will catch them. It will receive them. Has anyone ever heard of the disorder Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis? Sure. Does anyone know one of the major physical symptoms of that disorder? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Does anyone know one of the physical symptoms of Parkinson's or Huntington's or multiple sclerosis? What do people often seen doing? All right, maybe you've just heard of it but haven't seen it. What you see a lot of times, people who have this disorder shake and they tremble, and their hand is always moving, or their leg is always tapping, or their eye is always twitching. And what's happening is their dendrites are not really good at catching the acetylcholine neurotransmitters, and the neurons are just firing. The nerve impulses are just happening without the person's control. They can't seem to stop catching them, or they're not catching them right. So a lot of the times as we get older, we develop disorders with our neurons that prevent us from sending and receiving neurotransmitters properly. All right, so we've only got a couple people left who are still on the slides, so we'll be moving on shortly. Once again, you can always get it from your neighbor and or from the school's website and my page. But again, these two parts here, what we're thinking of is that if this is the end of neuron A and this is the beginning of neuron B, chemicals will shoot from neuron A across a synapse, across a space, and they'll land into the dendrites or the catcher's mitt of neuron B. And again, we'll have this in our diagram. We'll also be making it in our model. So we'll have a physical representation of this by the end of class. All right, last 5 seconds here. Panic can set in. And again, feel free to grab it from a neighbor and or go inside later on, or you can even come after school and I'm happy to put it back on the board, assuming you catch me before I steam. All right, so here we go. All right, our next vocab word today is myelin sheath. We're going to do that in green. We're only using one green this morning, so you can choose a green of your choice from your pencil box if you've got multiple greens. There will be some days we do dark and light and so on and so forth. All right, so the myelin sheath is a plasma membrane. It's the outer wrapping of the cell. And it coats or covers the entire length of the neuron, or the neuron's axon. Its job is to speed up impulses. Does anybody know why all wires, like the wires on my pencil sharpener or the wires on the charge cord for your phone, does anybody know why all wires have rubber around them?
To protect them from something.
All right, it protects them, and what else? It helps keep the electricity conducting in a smooth line. Generally speaking, if a wire is exposed, right, the metal is showing, you'll get electrocuted, right? The electricity can escape that wire. Same thing happens in your nerves. Electricity does run through your nerve cells, and this myelin sheath is just like the rubber around a wire. It prevents the electricity from spraying out into the nearby cells of the body and damaging them. Or it keeps just the information traveling in one direction. And again, I mentioned those disorders like Huntington's and Parkinson's. A lot of the time what happens with these folks, multiple sclerosis is a really good example of this, the myelin sheath degrades. What is it when something degrades? Have we heard this word before?
Is it like disappear?
Disappear, falls apart, goes away, right? If it degrades, all of a sudden electricity is shooting out of your neurons into all the neighboring parts of your body rather than travel from your fingertip to your brain or your brain to your heart. So you lose control over yourself. And you're not able to then send your neurotransmitters, and your acetylcholine doesn't get where it has to go, and so on and so forth. All right, looks like we're good. Let's move along. All right, now this is going to end in the axon terminal. You're going to use that pink. So I'd ask folks to grab a pink color, or if you've got a red, that works fine too. Just use it lightly, please. All right, so our axon terminal. We've got this word axon, which is part of a neuron. But this word terminal should seem vaguely familiar. What is it when something terminates, or what is a terminator, or what is the terminal of a train line, like the terminal of the Orange Line is both Oak Grove and Forest Hills? What is it when something terminates? Yes, Mr. It ends, right? So we all know the Terminator films. They're a little older than a lot of you guys, but like, so, right, a termination is the end of something, right? So obviously what part of the neuron is this? The beginning or the end?
What?
It's the end, right? So the terminal is the end of the neuron. It's long, thread-like parts of the nerve cell where nerve impulses travel to and then stimulate neurotransmitters to travel to the next neuron. Or it might stimulate other kinds of cells. These axon terminals might be connected to a muscle cell and stimulate that cell to do something. Or they might be connected to a gland of some sort, like your pituitary gland, which we'll talk about later on. So this is the kind of think of it as the fingers of the cell. It's the part that's touching another cell or another organ structure. And again, we have done that in a pink or a very light red, depending on what your palette is this morning. And again, folks who had muddled their way through the homework, all of this should seem a little bit familiar. Our definitions might be slightly different than the book, and that's because often they slightly modify them on the endcast. So we're looking at multiple variations to better increase our absorption. All right, and let's keep going. All right, now in our, where's that? I've got this in a leave that one. You just write that one in black for now. That's fine. So just like in your normal pencil, pen, whatever you're using. We also have the synapse, which we mentioned on the previous slide, but now we'll add a formal definition to it. So the synapse is a junction. Who's ever heard the word junction before? All right, it's roughly familiar. Let's make someone's life miserable. I'm going to pull a stick out, and that person will do their best to tell us what a junction is. Oh, she's not in this class anymore. Christina. Hi. And you can talk about it if you want about it, but have you ever heard the word junction, or what is a junction? And I'll give you an example. Let's say I've got two train tracks, and they're like this. Could you describe how this relates to two train tracks? Or South Huntington and Tremont. See, it's right out front. That's it. South Huntington and Tremont is a junction. A junction is where two things, where they meet, connect, come together, right? Intersect. Oh, good.
That was me. Right here.
Oh, good. Way to go, Miss Howard. All right, so a junction between two nerve cells, right? So it's a space where they intersect, where they meet, where they cross over, where they interlap, where they come together, consisting of now, what word does this look like, folks?
What?
It looks like the word what? The common word minute. But what word is it actually? So it's one of these words that has this thing, minute as in small. So folks remember that in English we have lots of words that look the same as each other but have a different pronunciation. They are homophones. So a minute gap across which impulses pass by diffusion of a neurotransmitter. So we're saying the synapse is the space between two cells where the chemical information, the neurotransmitters, will travel from the first cell to the second. Has attendance made its way around, folks? Everyone's gotten it? All right. Where is it right now?
Right there.
Oh, thanks. All right. Cool. All right, and you missed it. There you go. Thank you. All right. Looks like we're pretty good here. We're going to move on in just a moment. All right, so now we've got the basic layout of our neuron. Now, this isn't all of the parts, and for those of you that end up taking AP Bio in your junior year, you'll learn 20 more items about the neuron and all the little insignificant pieces. But for the purposes of the MCAS and a freshman biology course, we're going to cover the basics you need to be successful. Generally speaking, this appears as an essay question where they'll give you a diagram and you've got to label it and describe the parts. So we'll revisit the neuron a lot throughout the year.
Wait.
So, oh gosh, you have to get it from a neighbor. Got 10 seconds.
That's not it. Don't look at me. Stop looking at me. No. All right, I'll get it from neighbors.
There's a tiger running after you. It's about to get you. It's ready to pounce. Claws are extended. And there it is. All right. Now what we've got here is a picture. So this picture is going to go underneath your agenda. So this counts as our activity block. And you're going to draw this. You're going to label it. And use the colors from your notes to describe the parts, right? So you'll notice we've got the dendrites. What color we do our dendrites in, folks? Orange. And we've got our axon terminals. What color do we do those in? Our pink, right? Or red. So some of the parts aren't labeled here. So what I'm going to do is come around, drop off a textbook at each table, and then you go to page 95 or 96 for the rest of the parts you're missing. Yes, honey? All right. Yeah. And this should take us between 10 and 15 minutes. So you've got a little time to make a nice drawing. Does it have to look exactly like this? No, 80 to 90% the same, right? The picture is also in the book. So again, you can also scroll down to that. I'm going to come around with some books. And we'll pause this. Looking good. Nice. Now, unfortunately, the presentation I did during that some reason was corrupt and the computer wouldn't upload it. But the thing we did yesterday will be online by this evening. So yeah, if you ever missed something or if you want to go back and study it, it's there. And what I'll be doing, I film all my classes, and then at the end of the day, I just kind of like by lottery choose one at random. So it could be your class, it could be another class. You never know which one you'll find. But generally speaking, you know, I say close to the same thing every period, so it's not like you'll miss out on something missing a video. Starting on 96. Find this section. Here we go. For you. Merry Christmas. And happy birthday. Of course. The sharpeners are right over
I
there.
can't. I can't. Yeah, y'all.
You guys both? No? No problem yet. Of course not. What I will do though is I'll give you a little tutorial on how to make these. Now, you might notice about the size of this picture. You're good. I won't stop it. I'll leave it what to do. Alright, and I'll give folks some tips on drawing. Now, a lot of people look at a diagram like this. There's a little bit of a panic that sets in where they think to themselves, oh gosh, there's so many parts, I don't know where to start. The best thing to do with anything like this is start with the simplest shapes possible. Right, so like you could either start with this circle, and then around the circle, build a little sun, and then off the sun, put your little branches. Or you could start with a tube, you know, and then off your tube, put your little fingers, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, what is another quick route to get to doing this, given the resource that's right on your table? You can also trace it, right? So that's also an opportunity. If you and the person at your table are both trying to trace, as you know, there are many more books in the book room, so feel free to grab a second one for your table if you feel like your partner's hoarding it and you're thinking terrible things about them.
That's rude. See, black. I'm reading it rude.
You can still keep it the same format, right? Look at that looks perfect from yesterday. Good, right? So then you just put the picture right there.
And what about the photo? Where would I?
That should always go on a separate piece of paper.
And
So-
can I just attach it after?
Yeah, and you should. I give everyone binders. Did you take one? Because I give you guys paper periodically with your check-in charts and stuff like that.
My binder's right here.
Oh, obviously, right. Just open the desk. Yeah. So like, and you're just planning on something that kind of a thing in here. Great. We're in good shape. All right, and again, there's two routes. One, start with simple shapes and build off of the simple shapes. The second, of course, is to, you can just open up the book and trace that right out. Applying the same colors as our notes to the diagram. So part of what we're doing here is we're using what's known as the multiple intelligences theory, meaning that if you look at things in a multi-layered way, like you see them in different colors, and then you feel them through your diagram. Great, so now you're going to label all the parts, and then add the colors as well. You're in great shape, on your way. Now, synapse is one of the things that's not labeled on the diagram, but based on the definition, I'm hoping you can find where to put it, and then the neurotransmitters go inside the synapse. Yeah, and like the axon is just because of like the whole length of that thing. So I'll point at it up here, right? So like the axon itself starts here, goes that little tube all the way through. These are the terminals. Then these sections here are our myelin sheath, those spheres. 6 minutes. We're going to go through this diagram together as a class and make sure everyone's labeled and colored properly.
Wait, so you color and what is the that makes like the
Yeah, all those little branches here on just this end. Mhm. And again, so your diagram should have 3 things, right? It should have the picture, obviously. It should have the labels, the items, just, with their name next to them. And it should also have a color that matches the label to the diagram. We're also, as a class, going to add a couple of extra little things onto our picture after we're done. So, oh no, just do it for the lecture part. You guys don't need to see me on video, like walking around talking to people about random stuff.
is the whole thing orange or just that side?
Just the branch parts. So like you got one of them there, and I think you 3 or 4 more? Yeah. No, I was saying it's just like there's 2 ends of your neuron, so the dendrites are only on the one side. The other side is the axon terminals. So right now the one you're doing this part. All those fingers are the orange fingers, and these will be our red ones.